Okay, hi guys. My chapter this week is from the Oxford Handbook of Assessment Policy and Practice in Music Education, Volume 1, and it is Music Teacher Evaluation and Student Growth in Music by Drew Davison and Ryan Fisher, who are both from Memphis, Tennessee, or are presiding there, I guess, right now. And Drew Davison is a Fine Arts Advisor at Shelby County Schools. And Ryan Fisher is Associate Professor of Music Education and Associate Dean of the College of Communication and Fine Arts at the University of Memphis. So this chapter talks about how to measure growth and achievement in arts, in an arts subject like music that is not tested like other subjects. So from what I gathered from the writing was the authors asked how could arts educators be fairly evaluated when their students were not tested in standardized testing. Their suggestion was a multiple measures teacher evaluation system. A multiple measures teacher evaluation system would allow several factors to be taken into consideration when evaluating an arts educator, in our case, a music educator, and they could evaluate the teacher's effectiveness and impact on student success, growth, and achievement. The article begins by talking about the landscape of public policy and the impact of policy on music education. The authors point out that with ever-changing educational policies, music educators need to decide which policy changes will influence music education the most. And one way to know if policy is effective is to collect data. Data is collected for teacher evaluation, recruitment, retention, and compensation. So the authors brought up an issue that is unique to music education and assessment in arts-based education disciplines. The authors examined the role of assessment in music education and how it is used for a measurement. So the problem is music is a non-tested subject in standardized testing, and teachers' accountability is difficult to quantify. And the authors go on to state, teachers in subjects and grades that are traditionally tested with standardized measures might have a pathway toward populating their teacher effectiveness data that is less complicated than those educators without standardized measures. So what this means, for example, standardized testing would test a math class. And if the entire class did poorly, then the test scores would most likely reflect on the teacher, or at least that would be a place to start. And since music is not tested with standardized testing, there's no way to hold a music teacher to the same accountability measure as a teacher of a core subject. So in order to determine what educational policy has been most impactful on assessment in music education, the authors chose to examine the most costly piece of legislation to date. Davison and Fisher reviewed data from the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009. This was an omnibus bill signed by President Obama as part of a nationwide stimulus package. Out of $787 billion, it allocated $100 billion to the Department of Education, and 4% of that went to the Race to the Top initiative. The Race to the Top had 4 key reform areas. Number 1 was to adopt standards and assessments that prepare students to succeed in college and the workplace and to compete in the global economy. Number 2 is to build data systems that measure student growth and success and inform teachers and principals about how they can improve instruction. Number 3, recruit, develop, reward, and retain effective teachers and principals, especially where they are needed most. And number 4, turn around our lowest achieving schools. So the 4 core guidelines dictated by the of the U.S. Department of Education are the crux of this chapter. The authors emphasize this point by stating it is difficult to recruit, develop, reward, and retain effective teachers and principals if you do not have a system in place to adequately measure the value that each teacher or principal contribute to student learning. So they're saying we need some metric to gauge a teacher's or principal's impact on student learning. Also, the authors argue that we cannot make a difference in our lowest achieving schools. We cannot pay teachers more, prepare students for life, or adopt standards and assessments without a multiple measures teacher evaluation system. And the Race to the Top was a competitive grant program, that was used to encourage states to innovate and reform their education programs. Not all states participated, and I could not find data that stated if Utah participated or not. The Race to the Top created incentives for states to revise how they evaluated teachers, and teacher behavior became the most common way to evaluate. Common components of multiple measures of teacher evaluation come from observation. Observation of teacher practice is a common way to determine teacher effectiveness. Prior to the Race to the Top initiative, a teacher might expect to be evaluated annually. However, the initiative prompted more observations and by multiple administrators. Another component of multiple measures teacher evaluation is documentation of teacher professionalism. This is done through surveys from parents, peers, students, and stakeholders. An example is given from the chapter of multiple measures approach to teacher evaluation. If you notice, stakeholder perception and teacher content knowledge are the lowest percentages, and then is student achievement. Next is on student growth, which is between 2 or more points in time, and the greatest is teacher observation for an overall score of 100%. So this shows kind of a breakdown of how we want to put our energies or what the evaluators are looking at as far as what is important to them and what they want to measure. In some instances, components such as student growth and achievement are combined depending on the evaluation scheme. However, observation of teacher practice generally accounts for the largest weighting in many multiple measures systems. These measurements were used in what is now known as the Fine Arts Portfolio that began as a study in Memphis City schools in 2010. The Tennessee Department of Education created a council to examine possible ways to measure student growth in non-tested subject areas. As a result, the Tennessee Fine Arts Portfolio Model was created. Portfolios are collections of authentic student works from 2 points in time and allow teachers to demonstrate their effectiveness in fostering student growth. The portfolios show student samples in all 4 music domains of create, perform, respond, and connect. It was designed to be individualized and student-centered. The review and scoring process is first by the teacher, then by peers, and then goes through a blind peer review process. So the evaluation and scoring show evidence of student work through samples. The results, the portfolio program was lauded by former U.S. Secretary of Education Arne Duncan in 2012 as a fair system of measuring teacher effectiveness. and it allows teachers to be evaluated on something they already implement in their classroom. So to summarize, the Tennessee model was a success, and multiple grades use it, and multiple disciplines, including physical education, have adopted it. And it's a good example of how we can have some near concrete data to show a music teacher's effect on student growth and achievement. So I know this was a lot of information to take in, and I hope it's helpful in explaining one way of evaluating a music teacher's effectiveness. So thanks for listening.